Hello and welcome to the Curated Beauty Podcast. I'm Jessica Christie, CEO of Beauty Culture Med Spa and the founder of the new functional and regenerative business, Cultured Wellness. From my start as a physician assistant to now not only being a practitioner but leading my own businesses, I've been on a unique journey through health, beauty, and entrepreneurship. Join us as we explore everything from skincare secrets to leadership lessons. Whether you're passionate about beauty or striving to balance life's challenges, this is your space to connect, learn, and shine. Let's dive in. Welcome to another enlightening episode of the Curated Beauty Podcast, where we dive deep into the science of wellness and the beauty from inside out. I'm your host, Jessica Christie, and today we have the privilege of being joined by a very special guest, Dr. Kim Bruno. With a doctorate in chiropractic medicine from the prestigious National University of Health Sciences in Chicago and a board-certified expert in clinical nutrition, Dr. Bruno has dedicated her illustrious career to unraveling the mysteries behind illness and medical conditions. Her approach? Let's find the root cause and champion the power of prevention. As the clinical director and medical science liaison for Vibrant Labs, which is a cutting-edge functional lab testing facility renowned for its work with very complex patients, Dr. Bruno brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion today. Before her current role, she owned and operated her own practice for 17 years, collaborating closely with a diverse team of providers in multidisciplinary settings. A proud Colorado native, Dr. Bruno's love for nature is only matched by her devotion to her family, including her husband and 2 daughters. In today's episode, we are tackling a topic that's crucial yet often misunderstood: oxidative stress and how it differs from inflammation in our bodies. We'll explore the significance of the distinction, delve into actionable insights on managing oxidative stress, and discuss the role of genetic DNA SNPs or SNPs, as you may have heard of those, and that testing in our overall health journeys. While these tests offer valuable clues, DNA and genetic testing don't reveal the full story. That's where functional lab testing shines, providing powerful insights into the root causes of health issues and empowering patients towards true healing. So whether you're a longtime listener or joining us for the first time, prepare to embark on a journey of discovery with Dr. Kim Bruno as we uncover the secrets to combating oxidative stress and embracing a life of vibrant health. Let's get started. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Bruno. I am really excited to jump in.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be here and be able to just share this new information.
Yes. Now, if you could just introduce a little bit of your background and then what your focus is now, I would love to hear that.
Absolutely. So like you said, I've been in functional medicine for a long time, actually, before it was even called functional medicine, like back in the day when we called it holistic medicine and integrative medicine and all the other things before we kind of landed on this functional medicine realm. So I had practiced for about 17 years. And through that time, I dealt with your typical gut health, food sensitivities, all the way into my later years, really working with complex, chronically ill patients. I worked in a big immunology practice, so I saw a lot of Lyme, a lot of mycotoxin issues, patients who had just layers of immune system dysfunction because of the environment that they're in. That was actually all through the pandemic. So you could imagine like dealing with chronically immune compromised patients through a pandemic was just very taxing. Nice. And I transitioned into working primarily in the lab space after that time. I needed really a switch from direct patient care, but knew that I could still be of service in the functional medicine community by training and working with providers. And actually my ripple effect is bigger than working with patients one-on-one, right? Because then I get to train providers who have their patient base, and then they get to order these great labs and patients get to, get the benefit of the knowledge of the provider. So I'm working really in that education role now through Vibrant as their clinical director of outreach and education. And I work with training providers on the latest and greatest of lab testing, how to apply it within a functional medicine practice, why it's important, so they can just bring it to their patients.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So much of what you said there, I think that a lot of us as practitioners, when we're trying to have a bigger vision and we're trying to scale, we do get caught up in, oh my gosh, I can't let go of this identity of one-on-one patient care. And I know I've struggled with that myself. In order to build something bigger, you have to kind of move something off of your plate. But it's really cool because now you do have this platform for this new thing that holds so much space with information, but really needs that expert to lead the charge on what can this really afford us. Right. I also really love your story and how you started to really appreciate the functional side, even how personal it was with your own husband. I heard a podcast that you were talking about your husband's own journey with chronic illness, and even the way that us as providers can initially knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, you're fine, or dismiss, and we dismiss ourselves, our loved ones. And I think, if we're honest, for a while in our careers, we could have even been dismissing our patients or misdiagnosing them. So I would love to hear you share a little bit of that evolution and mindset for you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So like I said, my own practice had many kind of like transformative times. And one came when I had been on bed rest with my youngest daughter, and my husband's mother was in hospice at the same time. So I was at home on bed rest. He's flying back and forth. We live in Colorado, to Connecticut to see his mom. Like, obviously, this is a very stressful time. And after our daughter was born, within a week, his mom ended up passing away, and his health kind of like fell off a cliff. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. He went from being like an endurance athlete and a mountain biker and a skier and just this incredible force to be reckoned with, to someone who could just kind of barely make it through the day, and just crippling body pain and sweats and night sweats and everything else. And initially I did dismiss him because, mind you, like, we had just been through a traumatic experience. We had a newborn. We had a 4-year-old at the time. No one was sleeping. And so it's real easy to say, you're just not sleeping, right? Or you're just tired. And he was the one who came to me while I was on maternity leave and was like, please run some labs for me. Like, I want these labs. He told me what labs he wanted. And I was like, I rolled my eyes at him. I was like, I am not testing you for Lyme. I am not testing you for all these infections. You're kidding me, right?
Right. You're like, join the club, buddy. Like,
join the club. Like, I haven't slept either. Like, we're all exhausted. And he pushed me, and I was like, okay. And I still so vividly remember exactly where I was sitting when I opened up my computer when his lab results came in. And like, I just sat there speechless looking at my computer, like, oh my gosh. He's positive for Lyme. His Epstein-Barr titers are off the charts. His cholesterol, his total cholesterol was like 110. Like, wow. He was so sick. And there were all these other markers and flags everywhere. His inflammatory markers were so high. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like, okay. And I didn't treat him because I truly believe we shouldn't treat our own family because we're too close to it. Yeah. But I took those labs and I was like, okay, we got to get you to somebody. And that's what got me into actually knowing about Lyme. Like, I didn't even know anything about Lyme before then. I thought it didn't even exist in Colorado. Silly me. Right. And, we can have this debate, like, did he get it in Colorado? Did he get it in Connecticut? He grew up in Connecticut as a mountain biker, whatever. I mean, was it reactivation because of the stress? I mean, we can kind of go into that, but and we may never know, but ultimately, that was what he needed to deal with. And he went through the whole treatment of all the antibiotics and all the supportive and all the biofilm busters and all the mitochondrial repair and immune system repair and everything. And I had to learn alongside with him. And I had to eat my words because, I was humbled in that situation where I was really dismissive of him, thinking you just need sleep.
I love, though, that we're always given these crazy silver lining stories and all of our challenges. I'm writing an abstract talk right now on like how so much of our struggles are such a gift in terms of leadership, and the price that we pay for valuable lessons like that really do take us to that next level of being a practitioner that just can sniff out those like, oh, what did you just say? And they lead you down a path. And
Yes.
then luckily, we have these incredible developing functional medicine tests. Like you said, when you got those labs back, it's obviously overwhelming. And like, what comes first? The chicken or the egg or the horse or the car? Like, you're like trying to put these puzzle pieces together. And you and I have had conversations about there's obviously a genetic makeup, and it's become such a buzz to test people's DNA SNPs, but really that's not the whole picture. And for people that maybe don't know what we're talking about, just from that high level, what does that mean? Like those genetic tests, but then how is that part of the picture, but not the whole game plan?
Great. Yeah, so you're right. Testing genetics is like a big buzzy thing happening right now. And so this is going to be a little bit of a longer explanation, but I think that it's very important for everybody to hear. There's a lot of different types of genetic testing that's happening. In your traditional medical realm, when they are looking for genetic mutations or looking for disease-centric genetic coding, let's say the BRCA gene or something of that nature, they are looking for a gene that is predisposing you to a disease, or they are looking for an insertion or a deletion that in a lot of times is viewed as this kind of gloom and doom. Oh, you have it, bummer, right? Like that's it. On the flip side, we have the types of genetics that's most commonly being used within functional medicine. And it falls into the realm of epigenetics, which is also nutrigenomics. So you kind of clump those together, and then nutrigenetics. Now, what these are more process-based. So it's looking at the biochemical pathways and figuring out where there's a roadblock. And if there's a roadblock, then we should be able to either create a genetic bypass or somehow overcome it, or maybe take some of the pressure off of that pathway. So I like to tell my patients, it's like the Waze app. And if anyone's used the Waze app, like it tells you where there's a traffic jam. It tells you an alternate route to go on or whatever. My husband is in sales and drives all the time, and he like lives and breathes by this Waze app because it can tell him how to get places faster and if there's an accident up ahead or whatever.
Yeah.
So when you have this information of genetic SNPs on particular pathways, you can determine, like, let's say it's on a detoxification pathway, and we know that this is a heavily traveled highway and 2 lanes of your highway are closed and only 10% of the cars are getting by on the median. Like, that's a problem, right? The traffic jam that's going to be on that highway is a big issue, or potentially could be a big issue. So that's like the flip side too, is like knowing the genetics is knowing the map, but then knowing the actual value that's associated with that genetics gives you the whole picture. So an example in that picture would be like, let's say we're talking about a detox pathway, and we know that 2 lanes of the highway are closed. So potentially there could be a big backup there. But this happens to be a patient who doesn't have a big body burden. They eat organic. They don't use pesticides in their lawn care and all this other stuff. So maybe there's not a whole heck of a lot of traffic on that highway. And so they're managing just fine. Versus looking at somebody else's toxin test and saying, wow, you have the genetic predisposition to this highway being closed, and these particular toxins that go down that highway are so high because of the backup that now we have to really work on this particular part of the highway. And so it's bringing all of the information together and not necessarily just telling a patient, hey, you have this gene for this disease, too bad.
I mean, how often do you have people show up in your office and they're like, I have the MTHFR gene, and they like tell you like it's a death sentence. But it is such powerful information. And so I think that that's such a good example. That's one that's like coming to light a lot for people and their detox pathways and the importance of methylation. But it's not something that, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's the tools to kind of divert a little bit, to lessen that stress and burden, and maybe make some different lifestyle choices for sure.
Right.
But I really love being able to pair those two worlds together. Like, here's what our genes are, but also this is what's actually going on in our body. Right. And then I think that you have such an important job in helping not only the provider, but then indirectly the patient understand that why, and really helping patients journey alongside of their providers and make them so much less likely to drop off because they don't understand the complexities of what we're testing. And don't you agree that sometimes you can get into the weeds with even these functional medicine tests, especially if the providers are just ordering everything and then someone's like, I just spent so much money on these tests, like what's applicable and how do you direct that, you know?
Yeah, you have to make it applicable to the patient. I like the idea that patients are partners in their health rather than just a patient. And we can't order 6 inches worth of lab tests and not explain them to the patient and just give them a treatment plan and expect that they're going to be 100% compliant with this treatment plan, because there's a couple of things that are going to happen here. One, they're going to be overwhelmed. And a lot of times when people are overwhelmed, they just do nothing. Yeah. Or they don't have the buy-in. And so maybe they start the treatment plan and then it's hard. And then they go on vacation and then they don't understand the importance of it in the long term. And then they fall off the wagon, right? So you have to be strategic in how you order these tests, that we're not losing the forest for the trees. We're providing value to the patient of, yes, I ordered this test and it's important because of this, and this is what we're going to do about it. Don't order a test that it's not going to be part of their treatment plan. Yeah. So that all becomes extremely important. And when it comes to genetics, you do have to present it as what it is. It's a pathway. It's helping to be predictive and preventative. And we can manipulate this pathway through the choices that we make, through the nutrients that we give, through clearing the fog from the highway by clearing the toxins, or whatever the analogy is you want to give them, and not just make it like, oh gosh, you got that MTHFR gene. That really sucks, right? Like, right. And now they have like even worse anxiety because they are thinking that this is all kind of gloom and doom. And they see those studies that are associated with people who have a homozygous 677 have a higher rate of cardiovascular disease. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die at 45 from a heart attack. And you're like,
the power of one TikTok to send people into a tailspin, right? Like,
absolutely.
How about, okay, I know there's a new oxidative stress panel that came out with the functional lab testing through Vibrant that you are educating on. And I think that everyone has been so focused on inflammation. We talk about that, but really the oxidative stress part is so important. Can you speak kind of to that and what the purpose of bringing this test to the market was?
Sure. So up until this point, as a practitioner, if we wanted to look at oxidative stress, we had kind of one marker on an organic acid test, right? We had an 8-OHDG. That was a marker of oxidative stress on the DNA. And that's really all we had. We could make assumptions based on the patient's presentation, on how rapidly they were aging, if they could recover from exercise, some of these other just like conversational or history questions about like, was oxidative stress playing a role? But I will tell you that majority of providers weren't even thinking that. They were thinking more inflammation. Mm-hmm. And it's true, inflammation and oxidative stress go together. Inflammation can cause oxidative stress and vice versa. It's like a chicken and the egg type of scenario or mechanism. Yeah. But if we constantly come in with therapies to deal with only the inflammation, you're going to have some patients who don't get better. And then you as the provider are racking your head and you're frustrated and they're frustrated because they're like, I'm doing the anti-inflammatory diet. I'm taking my anti-inflammatory herbs and I still have X, Y, and Z issues. Yeah. And it's because the oxidative stress is not being addressed. And so we want to look at that pathway, but we want to look at it in a way that's not just saying, oh, okay, yes, there's oxidative stress. Give everybody antioxidants. Give everybody glutathione, right? Well, there is also the flip side of oxidative stress, of that kind of theory of hormesis, right? Mm-hmm. That like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yes.
some oxidative stress is good. Your body, you make it endogenously, right?
Yeah.
And it's true that these stressors can help your body survive, but it's when there's too much and too long and not being able to be resolved properly, that becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So enter in being able to adequately test for oxidative stress in two ways. One, we can test the actual damaged products for more than just 8-OHDG. So like I said, that is a marker of just oxidative stress on the DNA. But oxidative stress also affects proteins, it affects lipids, it affects RNA, and there's multiple damage markers that affect DNA. So now we can look at all of these different markers and determine this person has this damaged marker that's more affecting their lipid structure, right? Now we need to really be concerned about their cell membranes, and we need to be concerned about their oxidation of omega-3s when they bring them into their body. And what is that doing to their inflammatory pathway? Like, are they just oxidizing all of their omega-3s because of this pathway? Yeah. So we get to look at all of that information. But then we pair the genetics. So we have the real life information, and we look at their pathways and we say, what's happening on their glutathione pathway? What's happening on their superoxide dismutase pathway? What's happening? Are they converting all the way down to water? Or is that pathway getting stuck at hydrogen peroxide? And now they just have an abundance of hydrogen peroxide floating around in the body. That's not good. Yeah. And so we can really determine the pathway. And for some patients, maybe they have super clean, great open pathways. Well, in that situation, you don't want to give them a bunch of antioxidants because they do need a little bit of oxidative stress, and you would just be coming in and swiping off all of that kind of quote unquote good stress. Yeah. So knowing the pathways, where there's a backup, how to effectively treat it, and then knowing the damaged markers, as a provider, you can't get better than that, right? You get all of the information, and then you get to make the best decision for your patient rather than this blanket, like, just everybody should be on glutathione. Go ahead and take.
Right. No, and that's so true, because I think that as we see the emergence of a lot of people getting into functional medicine, because obviously they're passionate about it, it's all, I think, paved with very good intentions. But we see a lot of people, like we had a medical aesthetics practice first, and now we're integrating this. And obviously we're trying to do it the right way with education, but that's not the reality with any medical field, just like the med spa industry. Like, it's not all people who are focused on education and doing it the right way. And so they hear one buzzword like glutathione is so good, it's your master antioxidant. And then we're just like all drinking it 3-4 times a day because it burns off quickly. Like, these little things, but you might not know the whole picture. And I think too, what you said about like inflammation and oxidative stress is so interesting, because I think that both of those mindsets, when you hear them, they have such a negative connotation, but there's that concept of homeostasis has been fully lost. Like, we learned it back in biology in high school, and people really forget that there is positive inflammation as well. It's so important to set off those cascades, because our bodies, like, getting back to really knowing that our bodies have all the things that it really needs to heal itself, and supporting that is really the take home of how we can really bring that back into balance.
Absolutely.
When you look at educating someone on the new oxidative stress panel, is it something that you recommend people do earlier on? Or is it something where you're getting to that crux, like, gosh, I've identified all these other issues, I have my plan in place, things aren't getting better? Is that when you find people are reaching for it? Or is it more so emerging as one to kind of go to first?
That's such a great question. And considering that we really just launched it this last month, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Because I do see a role either way, depending on really how the patient is presenting. So I would say, if you always take your history, and every patient's going to be different. I have to have that little caveat. Yeah. But when you take their history, if it's pretty obvious, like, oh, this is like a gut protocol, this is, I need to hone in here, there's stuff that I got to do right off the bat, like, I would do that first.
Yeah.
And then when you get to that crux and you're like, okay, one of two things, either A, something's not clearing. We still have got some residual inflammation / oxidative stress, like something's still impeding the optimal function of this person's system. That would be a good place to put it. And then it creates a long-term plan for them, kind of gives them an oxidative stress score based on where they're at. And it might give you some ideas of, we need to go further down the toxin realm, or we need to look at some other reasons dietarily or whatever might be triggering that.
Yeah.
On the flip side, let's say you have a patient who has, or you have a practice that's like really big in cardiovascular health. I would move this to the forefront of what I would be doing, because we know that the endothelial layer, the glycocalyx, has such high impact from oxidative stress, and we haven't been truly able to measure it before, right? There are some cardiologists who have big fancy machines that can measure the actual glycocalyx, but really that's not like mainstream enough that most providers are going to be able to look at the glycocalyx that way. And understanding endothelial dysfunction and glycocalyx and impact with oxidative stress, I think, is foundational for anybody who's dealing with anything cardiovascular.
Yeah.
So if you're either in a cardiovascular practice, or if you are in a practice where somebody's coming in and saying, my father died at 45 and I'm 43, what can I do now? Right? Like, what's my risk? Then you can start building this in as more of an initial test. So I'm going to be really interested to see where it plays out.
Yeah.
But so far, we've heard providers talking a lot in the cardiovascular realm, a lot in the autoimmune realm, because there's an autoimmune mechanism that happens with molecular mimicry that the oxidative stress kicks off. So kind of knowing that from the beginning could be really helpful. And then a lot of those patients who are maybe already just going through toxic protocols, clearing their toxins and then getting their score, then being able to kind of move forward from there can also be a really great way to use it.
I think that's so nice to be able to offer somewhat of like a pathway. And also the glycocalyx, that is like a whole nother podcast of how important like vasculature is, and how I feel like it's not as sexy in our functional medicine industry for people to go back and start talking about cardiology. We're like, oh, we don't want to, like go to cardiology or like rheumatology. Like those are, we treat the whole person, but really when we think about, yes,
the whole person. It's the whole person.
It is arguably like when those guys get up there at A4M conferences and they're like, listen to me, like cardiology is still so important, because it's, 60,000 feet of blood vessels that we have in our body or something, like enough to go around and
you can't talk about, it's not just the heart. And I think that's what so many times people are like, well, my patient doesn't have cardiovascular issues. I'm like, okay, but do they have brain fog? Mm-hmm. Do they have any types of like brain issues? Do they have autoimmunity? Do they have like other types of systemic, because like the microcirculation goes everywhere.
Yeah. Everywhere.
And
it takes everything.
What we're talking about. We're not even talking about these big vessels. We're talking about the microcirculation.
I know. We fixed the gut. We have stopped all of the LPS, like leaky gut stuff. And then, okay, great. You're absorbing your nutrients more, but is it being carried to where you want it to go? It's so important. And so I love that thought process of using it alongside just in general, like, okay, maybe you don't have a cardiovascular diagnosis, but it's so true, bringing it back. And then two, I think autoimmune has become a huge focus because so many people are struggling with it. Talk about through the pandemic and like things that it's uncovered. People are finally actually changing their mindset to think about things in a different way. And they're asking questions, like really good questions. And so I just think that when we really bring these things to the forefront, there's going to be so many more patients that are wanting this kind of a workup. And
because it's truly root cause, right? Because instead of just naming whatever the autoimmune condition might be, we're saying, okay, so there's the name, but how did it get there? Yes. Right? Like what was the imbalance, the molecular mimicry, the immune system dysfunction? What tipped the teeter-totter prior to get the immune system to have this action on this particular organ or system.
Right. Like,
right?
The body doesn't just go and attack itself, it's
right. There's a reason.
Yes. Yeah. I actually just was having a conversation with a mom this morning who I'm kind of helping her through some stuff with her son, some neurocognitive stuff and just other options. And it is such a new field in so many regards. And so there's options that people want, like these pamphlets and all these resources. And a lot of it can be such a test and jump of faith in terms of trying a different path. And we don't know all the answers, but she was sharing with me, gosh, like just recently I had a mom that her daughter was diagnosed with Rett syndrome and somebody who was diagnosed with a horrible muscular dystrophy, a child. And it's like, but why? Of course, genetics can play into this, but what is going on at a deeper level that can also play into this? And our effect can just go so big and wide in terms of being able to unlock some of these answers and bring our bodies back into balance.
Yeah. Yeah. And really just pointing us, because, we need the information, but we need it in a targeted way that we can make a good decision from it. Mm-hmm. So it helps us to uncover to say, is oxidative stress playing a role here? Yes or no, right? And if yes, then great, let's go down that path. And if you test and it's no, then okay, well, then I think we're dealing with more of an inflammatory issue. And, you can start to peel that back now that we can have more information.
Yeah. If someone identifies oxidative stress, and this may be such a loaded question, but what would be an example of how someone would identify that that's definitely a problem on their functional lab sheet? Like, yes, mm-hmm. This is an issue. What are the key ways of addressing oxidative stress in the body?
Yeah. So it's interesting because depending on the genetic SNPs that are affected, there's different cofactors or nutrients that could create that genetic bypass to improve that pathway. Mm-hmm. So knowing that piece of it is important. And then knowing the marker. So like if we know we have a particular marker that has this association with, let's say, with the protein misfolding or the protein oxidation that's happening, that is where we see more of the autoimmune cascade happening. Because when the proteins are attacked, the immune system gets confused and it starts to attack your self proteins while it's trying to look at these altered proteins and that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So we could really, at that point, you really start looking for more of immune system function, and it'll lead you to maybe some additional tests mm-hmm. down that road mm-hmm. versus, and then also certain markers have more association with certain oxidants. Like, is it just your endogenous ROSs that are being created, right? Like you just have mitochondrial dysfunction and your mitochondria are kicking out a whole bunch of reactive oxygen species? Or is it that you have environmental toxins, exogenous, that are coming in and kind of creating some of that oxidative stress? So depending on which the marker is, and we will have an interpretive guide that goes with this, and the lab comments are going to be really great because this is a learning curve for everyone. These types of markers have never been available before. So there's going to be a lot of training and information out there. So when you look at the test and you're like, okay, we have this marker and it's associated with these types of conditions. So now I need to go down that road and really make sure that I'm proactive with my patient in that realm. And then on the flip side, these markers are more associated with environmental toxins or whatever. We need to do a total tox testing to really start to clear that, because you got to find the source. Mm-hmm. And then based on their genetics, it's like, oh, this person really would benefit from glutathione, or they really wouldn't benefit from glutathione and they really need alpha lipoic acid, right? There's different antioxidants that work into those antioxidant pathways more effectively once we know their genetics. It's like sending the right highway cleanup crew to the right highway mm-hmm. because you know what is happening on the highway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's so valuable. I guess I would end with how, if someone's having these issues, what would be your top tips from being a practitioner to now leading all these practitioners? What are the success indicators of finding practitioners that really lead the charge well? What sorts of things do they offer? Like, how would someone sniff out a practice that would be able to help them get optimized and get back into homeostasis and treat them really well?
Yeah. Great question. I don't know if there's a perfect answer for that. I think there's a lot of great practitioners out there. But what I would say is a practitioner who sees you as an individual and doesn't just have a practice protocol, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And that may be an unpopular opinion, and maybe some people are not going to be so happy that I said that. But I was always under the impression, and I have always run my practice, that every single patient is a biochemical individual. And so what worked for Jane is not going to work for Susie. And we need to make sure that we're looking at them as an individual. Yeah. And so when you're interviewing, and you should, when you go in and talk to a provider, you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. You guys got to make sure that you're going to work well together, because this really is a partnership. It's not just them telling you what to do. So I would, as a patient, go into it thinking, can I work with this person? Can I link arms with this provider? Do they listen to me? Are they treating me like an individual? Are my feelings valid? Though all those things. Yeah. And then when they start telling you about how their practice is run, and sometimes it's with them, and sometimes you meet with a health coach first or whatnot, ask that question. Does everyone do the same protocol? Does everyone do the same testing? Or do you individualize it? Because I think that's really important.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And I see where you're saying that could be an unpopular thing, because as practices, as we create clear brand imagery across maybe multiple locations, there has to be a standard process for everything that we do, for every way that we approach a lab read or like a new patient or whatever. We all have standard operating procedures. But if you don't have the flexibility to customize and pick and choose and really have a la carte options to really fully treat that patient, we really aren't doing them a service, which is really what we all should be doing in the first place.
Absolutely. And I think there's a benefit, and I did this for a while, where it was like, I had a long enough waiting list or wait time to get in for their initial visit that I would send out videos on a good anti-inflammatory diet and all this stuff. So by the time the patient would get to me for like the first visit, I had kind of cleaned the slate a little bit, right? We had like cleared out some personal care products. They are eating a little bit better, whatever. That I think is great, like standard operating procedure, because it makes, by the time you get to me, you've unmuddied the water a little bit. Yes. And then from there, customizing. So I think there's a place that initially maybe everyone goes through gut protocol, great, and then we customize after that.
Yes.
That I think would be totally acceptable.
And then I think one last important point is sometimes I think we can lose people by getting so complex. And sometimes what you just said resonated so much, because in my own personal health journey and the journey of my primary family, my children, sometimes when you work on one thing that seems to be the most important and you prioritize and you focus, it heals and then it directs you to the next place. And I think that that's the beauty of customizability. Like your body was not ready to detox heavy metals yet. It really wanted to start with reestablishing gut health. And then you've opened up pathways. You've made that next step easier. You've made it the next natural choice. And I think that does require a level of critical thinking. And I think you can see that when you're interviewing your practitioners and you're watching their physical presence on whatever platforms they're on.
Absolutely. I agree.
Well, I am so grateful for your time and for you shedding light on such a huge concept as functional lab testing. And obviously there's so much to it, but it really can be broken down and simple by choosing the right provider and by using the right tests. And so I'm so grateful for your time and looking forward to a continued relationship as we get to use some of these products as well within our practice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful to meet with you and be able to share this knowledge.
Yes, thank you. Well, if you guys are looking for more knowledge on functional lab testing, wanting to get more information, we will put that in the show notes today. And that's a wrap on another enriching episode of the Curated Beauty Podcast. If today's conversations resonated with you, I urge you to share it with someone you believe could benefit from it. Let's spread the beauty, knowledge, and empowerment far and wide. For more in-depth resources, information about who we are, or if you're interested in becoming a patient or training directly with me or one of my team, visit our website at beautyculturespa.com. Don't forget to stay connected with us on Instagram for all the latest updates, behind the scenes, and beauty wisdom. Follow us at beautyculture.medspa and at B Cultured Wellness. That's the letter B, Cultured Wellness. Thank you for being with us today. Keep curating your beauty both inside and out. Until next time.